The following hour is brought to you by MidasResources.com. Call Midas today to protect your future at 1-800-686-2237.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore, substituting for Dr. Nutrimedical here on Nutrimedical Report on Monday, the 9th day of June, year of our Lord 2014. Before we get started with the show here, I want to ask all of you to please consider offering a prayer for Dr. Deagle and his health. He has some health issues going on, and he's asked me to pray for him, which I have, and I'm asking you to do the same thing too. Please pray for Dr. Deagle to have his health improve. Moving on from there, we're having an unusual late spring here in south central Missouri. It's typically by the middle of May, beginning into the middle of May, the rain has begun to taper off. Instead, it just keeps coming. We're seeing rain forecast every day of the week, which is highly unusual for this time of year. It is raining right now as I speak, by the way, at about 4 p.m. on Monday, the 9th day of June. Usually by now we're into the dry period, and it just gets drier as it gets deeper into the month. But last Wednesday, I think I mentioned this last Friday on Dr. Deagle's show, the storm that went through the Midwest wiped out 1 million acres of corn, and I'm sure plenty of wheat and barley and so forth, soybeans, putting even more pressure on these crops that should be harvested. I was reading a story earlier today that some Amish farmers back east are getting their crop in very late. They're taking a chance of not having a crop at all. And some farmers are just taking their seeds and selling them. How about that? This is a live call-in show, and if you have a question or comment, you're certainly welcome to call in. Here's a call-in number. It's 800-259-5791. I say again, 800-259-5791. On my show this morning, I am on Republic Broadcasting every morning from 6 to 7 a.m. Central Time. We had a caller mention something that I also occasionally mention, and that's the possibility that we could have two or more of these scenarios that we're concerned about happening concurrently. And I certainly feel that is the case, and I've stated so publicly a number of times. Let's review real quickly some of the top ones. These viruses, MERS is at the top of the list right now because there is MERS in the United States as we speak. Ebola is not in the United States that we know of. With a long incubation period and about a 33% lethality, MERS is certainly on my top 10 list. The possibility of an electromagnetic pulse attack. This would be a man-made event as opposed to a Carrington event, which would be energy coming at us from our sun, either one of which could literally knock this country down to the Stone Age. We won't be going back to the 1800s. It won't be a Little House on the Prairie. Little House on the Prairie, the TV show, the series, took place in the 1890s in the American Plains. The United States of America in the 1890s had a fully functioning infrastructure without electricity or internal combustion engines, either one. There was steam power, wind power, animal power, manpower, telegraphs, and so forth. Well, that infrastructure is gone, so you can't go back to the 1890s unless you have the infrastructure of the 1890s. The infrastructure of the 1890s is pretty much in museums, for the most part. For the most part. Reliable estimates by scientists and engineers who've looked into this in the military is that 9 out of 10 Americans would be dead in about a year if the power grid went down nationwide. So that's certainly near the in my top 10 also. World War III? Well, yes. I have multiple reliable reports from multiple private trusted sources about Russian special forces, what they call themselves Spetsnaz, being in this country. And it's a clear and present danger, in my opinion. About 1,000 a week, disregard, about 1,000 a month arriving at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where they're dispersed to other places around the country. Reliable estimates, 80 to 85,000 Russian special forces in the United States right now. I got a report just yesterday about Gurkhas. These are the mercenaries from South Asia, from out of the Nepal area. The British have been using them as mercenaries for a better part of 2 centuries. A reliable first-hand report from a friend of mine in Colorado that he talked to Gurkhas. They were driving a black Chevy Suburban and had their emblem on the side, which is these crooked knives that they carry. The 2 of them crossed. They call them kukris. And they identified themselves as being mercenaries. So why are they here? Excellent question. I've said for quite a while that a foreign invasion will be with the foreign troops being invited here. It won't be a Red Dawn parachutes at 0700 coming out of the sky, although that is certainly a possibility. But most of them are already here, at the invitation with the full knowledge and consent of the United States government. Full knowledge and consent. And when the time comes, there will be a crisis. I can't say what it will be, EMP event, an attack of some kind. They will be here to help us in our time of need. Our friends from across the water will be here in our time of need to help us out. That's how it will be portrayed in the media. Unfortunately, many of these Russian Spetsnaz, being Caucasian and speaking excellent English, better than many of my hillbilly neighbors out here, you won't be able to tell them from Americans. If they're wearing American uniforms, which they may be, speaking perfect English, how are you going to know? Well, if they're doing something unconstitutional that violates your rights, well, then they're a criminal, aren't they? And they deserve whatever response that you're willing to give them. The economy. The debt, the hard debt is in the teens of trillions of dollars. I hear various estimates, 15, 18, 19 trillion dollars with a T. The unfunded liabilities is well more than $200 trillion, which I understand is more money than there is wealth on the planet. Clearly and obviously, those unfunded liabilities could never ever be repaid, nor could the 15 or 18 or 19, whatever it is, trillion dollars of debt that we know of ever be repaid. It's a mathematical impossibility. It can't be done. There's not too many options to deal with that. The government could repudiate the debt, which of course would destroy the credit rating of the United States government. And who's going to want to buy bonds, treasury notes, treasury bills? After repudiation of the debt, they could try to inflate the currency, pay it off with cheap dollars, which appears to be the direction it's going right now. There's no good, or will be no good outcome. Whatever outcome there is dealing with this massive amount of debt and liabilities, there will be no good outcome in terms of us barefoot peasants out here. I refer to myself and almost all of us. Here's our break. Call number is 800-259-57. What a beautiful world this will be. What a glorious time to be free. All right, We're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore. It is 9th day of June. This is J.R. Moore substituting for Dr. Bill Deagle here on Nutrimedical Report. My website is thelibertyman.com. Thelibertyman.com. There's some interesting free downloads there. One is a book older than the Bible. The title of it is The Art of War by General Sun Tzu. Mandatory reading in most military academies around the planet. There's a free download of a report published by the scientists and engineers appointed by the government to look into what EMP can and what it cannot do. It's about 300 pages. The first 75 pages is what most of you will want to read. Very important. Another free download is a book. It's about 40 years old. The title of it is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. Excellent, excellent book. For you Christians out there, you'll find the book is very consistent with biblical teaching. It's an excellent book, and I highly recommend it. That's all at my website, thelibertyman.com, thelibertyman.com. We've got a caller on hold here, Mark in Oregon. Good morning, or good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon to you, John. Great to speak with you, and certainly offers me a great opportunity just to express my gratitude to you for all that you do. You're at the forefront. You have been for a long time trying to help people.
Thank you.
And yes, sir, we all do appreciate it. And I certainly have prayed for Dr. Bill and his loved ones, and we can only hope that it's God's will that Dr. Bill will see a speedy improvement and healing in whatever the problem is. And Dr. Bill and his loved ones are certainly well worth praying for.
Absolutely.
John, I have heard just mentions, and I think there was a more detailed report on the Coast to Coast program, I believe last weekend, but I wasn't able to stay up for it, that really included more of the current information on this idea of the control of the world's population through electronic means to control the mental state of people from satellite-based technologies up in our sky up there. And I don't know if you've heard of a gentleman named Stuart Spurlow.
I haven't.
You have?
I have not.
Yes, he was part of the Montauk Project. He's been interviewed on Coast to Coast several times, so he's had fairly wide exposure. And he talks about trauma-based programming that was used there and opening up wormholes for entities to be able to enter into our dimension here and such like that. But he also spoke of in an interview I heard that he did several years ago about what I've just mentioned to you, which is more recent mentions in the alternative media about this control of people's emotions, mental states, through the electronic manipulation of their own auric fields, if you will, their own energies.
Right.
And this seems to be something now that has taken the form, from what I've heard of it so far, is 180 satellite system that is currently being deployed. I believe the information I heard said that Google was actually the one who was paying for this to be done. It's being done through private missile launch companies like SpaceX, I would assume.
Right.
And that is currently being deployed, and is actually the total coverage of the planet with the ability to be able to manipulate the population of the world. And I, knowing how well informed you are, John, was wondering if you had any information on this in general and or in the current reports that are coming out about this.
I do, and there's a book, I talked about it this morning on my show. The short title is Matrix Roman numeral 3, Matrix 3, by Vladimir Valerian. Used copies on Amazon are going for $125, They're only available as used copies. My copy is well used, and this is a large format paper-bound book that is about 4 inches thick. And I'm looking up the complete title here on Amazon. My computer is not working all that fast, but I really appreciate Valerian's work because he includes, the one reason the book is so thick is he includes photocopies of original source documentation, not just footnotes. And it's a encyclopedia, basically, of how what technology exists and how they use it to manipulate human brains. And I'll be pulling this up here and get the complete title is very telling, and it should be here. Let's see. Here's a complete title: Matrix 3, Volume 1. The psychosocial, chemical, biological, and electromagnetic manipulation of human consciousness. There's a mouthful for you. Let me say it again. Let me say it again slowly. Matrix 3, Volume 1. The psychosocial, chemical, biological, and electromagnetic manipulation of human consciousness. Published in 1992 by Valdemar Valerian. Used copies are the only ones you can get. $125 is the least expensive one on Amazon. If you really want to educate yourself on this, Mark, you may want to get a copy of this book if that topic is interesting enough to you. It's 4 inches thick. I mean, this is a lot of book here, a lot of book.
Sure.
And, there are many, and what you'll find is there are many ways that the powers that be have been and are manipulating our consciousness. I can give you one example of an acquaintance of mine. He's a friend of a friend, Navy veteran, nice guy, suffering from severe depression for more than 20 years. And we were talking about his depression, he and I happened to notice that it looked like he had some fillings, some mercury amalgam fillings in his mouth, just in casual conversation. So I said, "Would you open your mouth, please?" And I took out my little flashlight, and his teeth looked like a '57 Chevrolet bumper. I mean, and Mark, it's well known if you have access to a copy of the Merck Index. One of the well-known side effects of mercury, which is what these silver amalgams are, mercury, is depression. And I told this gentleman, I said, you will never, ever beat depression until you get that mercury out of your mouth. It's just not going to happen. All right, this is J.R. Moore, substituting for Dr. Bill Deagle here on the Nutrimedical Report on Monday, the 9th day of June. This is a live call-in show, and it's your show. If you have a question or comment, you're certainly welcome to call at 800-259-5791. I learned about the human condition known as denial at a tender age of 20. I was a 20-year-old intelligence analyst serving in psychological warfare in Vietnam in the fall of 1967. Shortly after I got there, the first week of September 1967, I was told by my co-workers in military intelligence that there was going to be a massive enemy attack near the end of January 1968 around the Chinese New Year celebration called Tet, T-E-T, Tet. As the fall went on, September, October, November, I was attending classified briefings at the 4th Corps headquarters, picking up documents from the CIA, from military intelligence, from the Army Security Agency, Rand Corporation documents. We were interviewing Viet Cong defectors. Multiple stories about the training going on with the Viet Cong. And there was no North Vietnamese down in the Mekong Delta at the time, at least if there weren't very many. The training going on, the equipment and supplies being laid in preparation for this massive attack at the end of January. In the meantime, enemy activity, at least where I was in the Mekong Delta, had dropped off to almost nothing, to the point where the general in charge, General Westmoreland, gave his famous light at the end of the tunnel speech to a joint session of Congress in December 1967, where basically he said the Viet Cong were finished as an effective force in the field and could no longer mount an effective offensive against the Allied forces. That's what he told the joint session of Congress. It's highly unusual for a general to give a speech before a joint session of Congress. I don't know how many times that's happened, but I know it's highly unusual. Well, it was only less than 2 months after that speech that the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese hit us with everything they had. Now, during those months, September, October, November, I was telling my buddies in my unit in psychological warfare that they needed to be stocking up on ammunition, stocking up on food, and getting ready. This is where denial comes in. Very, very few paid heed to my warning. Now consider this, ladies and gentlemen. You're a soldier. You're in a combat zone. You have one of your buddies who works in military intelligence, having privileged access to classified information, and he's sharing with you his warning. He's sharing a warning that you better get ready. And despite the circumstances I just described, you don't pay heed. You don't make any attempt to get extra ammunition. You don't make any attempt to get extra food. So when you wake up the first morning of the offensive, it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning when the shooting started, you're caught with your pants down. Not enough ammunition, not enough food. You're simply not ready. So that was my introduction to the human behavior called denial, and it is not a river in Egypt. Denial. Many of you run into this yourselves. You hear me talking about the Russian presence here. Well verified, well documented presence of Russian special forces here in this country. You read the reports about the threat of electromagnetic pulse from very reliable sources. Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, I don't agree with the man politically, but he's been trying to do the right thing now for 4 or 5 plus years, attempting to get funding from Congress to put the mechanism in place to protect our national power grid with no success of any consequence. Try to tell one of your friends or your relatives or a co-worker about the threat of electromagnetic pulse attack and see how far that gets you. Probably some of you have already tried it. I wouldn't doubt it. Most likely the response you get will be negative. It will not be a response that would include any preparation on the part that you've told people this threat to. That's not expected. It's highly unusual for a person to take this kind of information, check it out on their own, and then take action. I don't want to assign any percentage to it, but it's a small percentage of people who will actually do that once they understand and are introduced to this kind of information. Highly unusual. Doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying. What I do encourage is do not get an emotional attachment to the outcome. That's probably not the wisest thing. It'll make you crazy, quite frankly. So don't do that. Don't get an emotional attachment to the outcome of telling people this information. It's simply not a wise thing to do. What is wise is to live a life of preparedness. It is a bit schizophrenic, quite frankly, to have a normal life, employment, social obligations, friends and family, all the things that people do normally, while at the same time preparing for the end of the world as we know it. Yes, that is a bit schizophrenic. I don't deny that. But you can do it. You have to be reasonable, of course, with what you're doing with your time and resources. But you can do it. I've been doing it for a long time. When my wife was pregnant with my daughter, I very quickly realized that I would have this infant, that I would be responsible for the health and well-being of this tiny creature, my daughter, who could not take care of herself. And I took that responsibility very seriously. I bought my first case of freeze-dried food while my wife was pregnant for that reason. Up until then, I'd never given it much thought. I knew that I was skilled enough and competent enough to take care of myself and my wife in a severe crisis. I had not made any special preparations. But when my wife was pregnant, that all changed. I took it very seriously and began making the preparations that continue to this day to care for those I care about. What you do is your decision. The consequences of that decision are what you need to live with, not John Moore. You'll need to be the one living with him. I've been doing paid consultations for preparedness since the summer of 1977. What I run into a lot is a married couple where one spouse thinks this is necessary and the other doesn't. We've got a break here. The call-in number is 800. I remember when I lost my mind. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore, substituting Dr. Bill Deagle here on the Nutrimedical Report on Monday, the 9th day of June. My website is thelibertyman.com, thelibertyman.com. My radio show is Monday through Friday, 0600 to 0700 Central Time, Monday through Friday on Genesis Communications. We've got a caller here on hold. We've got James in Montana. Good afternoon, James.
Good morning, or afternoon, I'm sorry.
I keep wanting to say good morning also, so don't feel like the Lone Ranger.
Yeah. John, if you've covered it, I don't think I ever have heard it. I was curious about something. In the times that you see coming shortly here, what caliber and type of rifle do you prefer?
Well, it's like asking a mechanic which wrench does he like. What I like is based on my knowledge and my experience and my physical ability, James, which is not going to be the same as other people's. And I do, just like a carpenter or mechanic who uses different tools for different jobs, I use different firearms for different jobs. So let's just go through a couple of things here. My daily carry pistol, and pistols are when you don't believe you'll need a firearm, but it's there just in case. That's the job of a pistol. It's a cut-down 1911. It's a Daytonix Mark VI, and that's my daily carry piece, 45 caliber semi-automatic 1911 cut-down. As far as a battle rifle, the rifleman's rifle is the M14, or the civilian equivalent, the M1A. It's the premier battle rifle, in my opinion. It's one of the rifles I carried in Vietnam. I carried M14, M1 carbine, and Thompson submachine gun. But the M1A is a 308 or 7.62 NATO, same caliber. It's a 1,000-yard rifle. It's tough. It's reliable. It's accurate. It's also a heavy piece. Not suitable for women or teenage boys, most teenage boys. For a healthy male with the normal strength of an adult male, it's an excellent choice. My friend Command Sergeant Major Dan Page, who's been on the air with me, as a general all-around survival rifle, he recommends a 22 caliber long rifle, and I cannot disagree as far as general all-around survival purposes.